Over the past few years, there have been many high-profile cases regarding poverty and poor social conditions in Aboriginal communities. Whether it's missing and murdered women, the housing crisis in Attawabascat, residential school settlements, or a lack of potable water. This has resulted in many people who believe that Aboriginal peoples choose to remain economically dependent. This just isn't the case. Many Aboriginal communities have worked long and hard to overcome barriers to economic development. Their approaches include education agreements. Agreements were signed with Mi'kmaq and BC First Nations in 1998 and 2012 respectively. These agreements would see these First Nations assert jurisdiction over education in their communities. The First Nations Statistical Management Act, giving real property taxation powers to First Nations, creating the First Nations Tax Commission, the First Nations Financial Management Board, the First Nations Finance Authority, and the First Nations Statistical Institute. Furthermore, relevant sections of the Indian Act no longer apply. The First Nations Land Management Act. This act gives First Nations more authority over the management of their lands, including the authority to grant property rights and management of the environment. As well, relevant sections of the Indian Act no longer apply. Increased organizational activities such as the AFOA, CANDU, and the CCAB. Organizations such as the Aboriginal Finance Officers Association, the Council for the Advancement of Native Development Officers, and the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business provide important resources for information and policy sharing, as well as professional certification of their membership. Settlement of land claims. Settlement of past grievances is an important part of moving forward. In the past, governments often expropriated Aboriginal lands to the detriment of Aboriginal economies. Other development laws and agreements, such as land codes, bylaws, and constitutions. First Nations have enacted these to better manage their lands, assert their lawmaking authority, and govern themselves more effectively. Education. In the 2010-2011 school year, there are more than 18,500 Aboriginal students attending post-secondary institutions across Canada. More than 2,200 of them were business students. These are just a few initiatives undertaken by Aboriginal communities across Canada to redevelop their economies.